Assalamu alaikum everyone. So today delivering this talk will be Ibrahim Khan, who's kindly come down to LSE to deliver it. He's currently an associate in funds at Debevoise and Plimpton, having trained at Ashurst. And prior to this, he read for an MA in Islamic Banking Finance and a BA in PPE from Oxford University. He recently also completed his Alamiya degree from Al Salam Institute, and he's also the co-founder of Design Moji, an online apparel outlet which has over 300,000 Facebook followers. And outside of work, he has moved on to found the IRU at MEND, a pro bono law clinic, which brings together Magic Circle corporate lawyers to tackle Islamophobia cases. And he has also co-founded and regularly contributes to the Islamic finance blogging portal, IslamicFinanceGuru.com. And yeah, without further ado, I'd like to introduce Ibrahim.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. You're slightly uncertain about that. You're like, wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Let's see what he's like first. Bismillah walhamdulillah wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah amma ba'd. I know this is being videoed, and I know what's going to happen at the end of it is half of me is going to be showing on this video. So, concentrate because you won't be able to get the live on the video. How many of you guys were here last time I did this? Excellent. So you're not going to be bored then. That's good because a lot of the content is similar, and then there's some of the content that's different. So you guys have seen the marketing. You're obviously here. You've seen the title of the talk. What kind of things do you actually want me to deal with? What were the questions in your mind that actually brought you here today? Any takers?
For me, it was kind of like to what extent do you plan your career, or you leave your options open for Allah's plan for you? So
Okay. Interesting. Interesting. Any others?
I was hoping to understand the main factors that would impact a good choice in planning for the career.
Excellent. Okay. Any others?
With interest being such a prevalent part of society, to what extent are certain careers kind of permissible?
Okay. That's really, all of these are really good contributions. I'm particularly thinking about yours. I need to come up with a good answer to that.
I was just thinking about your opinion on the most ethical careers that will kind of allow you to forward yourself as a Muslim as well as give you a decent salary.
Nice. Any others?
It's like how to navigate your way through work while sort of maintaining your Islamic morals and principles.
Excellent.
Not compromising.
Excellent. So inshallah, we'll touch on all of these today. So this slide, what do you think? Quick show of hands. Do you think that it is compatible, or is it not compatible? I mean, obviously the picture on the left is, assuming that this person is not actually smoking. He's representative of something. Do you think it's compatible or not?
I think it can be if you're not like that and you're more strong-willed. I know lots of investment bankers who are also Muslim
Yeah.
and kind of resist the loud culture, and it's difficult, but it is
Yeah.
definitely doable if you're strong enough.
Do you think it's a contradiction to be a Muslim investment banker?
No,
Okay. Why not?
because it's kind of like, it depends also what you use all that wealth that you're building up for, and it depends how you allow it to affect you. And
Okay.
I think you can use that in very,
So-
Muslim ways.
So the ends justify the means.
Yeah, but also your behaviour, like,
Well, it could be one of the two. It could be either the ends justify the means, or the means that in of themselves have to be according to the right behavior.
I think it's difficult to get out of like the corporate scheme that we're in. So why not go with it, make as much money as you can, and then use that in the best way that you can, you know, asking for strength from Allah and guidance from Him. I don't think that, like, if you enjoy the work and you use the money in the right way, you give to charity, you do good, you're a good person, you worship, you believe, that's the problem.
Yeah. Well, we'll go into all of this inshallah today. That's really useful, and do, you know, shout at me and well, not literally shout at me, but do, you know, raise your voice and let me know if you disagree or if you've got any other thoughts about this as well. So let's crack on. We will deal with this precise subject very shortly, inshallah. I mean, this is all really being covered. The only, I think, thing to mention is, so this Islamic Finance Guru website, we do podcasts. So if you are into podcasts, if you listen to stuff, it's called Millionaire Muslim. I'm not a millionaire, don't worry, but that's, you know, the aspiration. And you know, we're basically on every kind of podcast platform you can think of. So do follow us on that. Follow us on the website. If you're into YouTube, I don't know if you've heard of YouTube. It's a thing. You can follow us on that as well. And we do tafsir. So we do tafsir of the Quran, a finance and business focused tafsir of the Quran. So we go through different ayahs. Not every single ayah is going to be about, you know, business and finance. We don't take an ayah about, I don't know, something, you know, really like, for example, cleanliness, and talk about business and finance. But we talk about business and finance themed ayahs in a very detailed way. So if you're into that. So why are we actually here? And I say we because normally I do it, and my friend Mohsin, who also runs Islamic Finance Guru, he normally does this with me. But why do we do this? Why do we take our time out to do this? Well, the reason why we do this is because we think it is our responsibility to maximize the impact that we have on all of society. And that's a responsibility not just upon me, it is a responsibility upon all of us. And a key way of us making sure that we have the maximum impact is by empowering others to have the maximum impact that they can. So that's the first thing. And you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the hadith of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, where he says that the Muslimin are kajasadin wahid. They are like one body. إِذَا اشْتَكَى مِنْهُ عُدْوٌ تَدَاعَ لَهُ سَائِرُ الْجَسَدِ بِالسَّهْرِ وَالْهُمَّةِ. If one portion of the body, if like a hand of the body hurts, then the rest of the body aches and feels that pain. So we have a responsibility for our brothers and sisters. We have a responsibility for the wider community as to how we can eke out the absolute maximum benefit that we can from them. And you guys at LSE and other Russell Group universities have a very, very important and significant and pivotal role to play, and you need to be aware of that. And that's not to say that you're special or I'm special. You know, every single person can get to Jannah. That's the ultimate end point. But given the specific talents that you have, it's particularly important for you to fulfill the you know, the potential that you have, because it is not necessarily the same potential that is available to other people to fulfill. So if you don't step up, it won't get done. Whereas if someone with less ability doesn't step up, then the likelihood is that it may well still get done. So that's the first thing. The second thing is obviously, you know, talent. We don't want that to go to waste. It's the same principle really. And then finally, you guys at LSE have a real strong culture of going into the city, going into the financial world. And that's fine. And I was at Oxford, and there's a fairly strong culture there as well. There is also a culture of going into lots of, you know, corporate kind of jobs, civil service, fairly respectable, well-paying professions. But isn't it a travesty if we have this dichotomy between our professional life and our personal life, and we in our professional life are just Muslim really in name and nothing else, and in our personal life we are out on the streets giving da'wah and debating with people on Hyde Park Corner or whatever your thing is, and yet on the Monday morning you're in a suit and you're sat at work and you're having cream cheese and salmon, and it's just a completely different approach to life. What I'm getting at is that if you are approaching your life holistically, and if you are a Muslim through and through, then actually when you go into work and live as a Muslim properly and according to the real spirit of Islam, then that is actually much stronger da'wah than you could give outside on the streets or on these debating platforms or wherever you might be giving da'wah out and about. And if you think about it, the people that we know, the people that bring Islam to the community, are either people that we have personally interacted with, so non-Muslims know about Islam through personal interactions, or because of famous figures like Mo Farah, Mo Salah, etc., etc., etc. And so we can fulfill that first bit of it, where we have that strong personal relationship with people, but that only comes when Islam is actually part of your professional identity. So this is also part of why I'm here today, which is that you can be a Muslim and you can be a professional, and there is actually a really strong way how to integrate both of those two things together, because otherwise it's meaningless. It really is meaningless. I'm going through a fairly busy spell at work, and that means midnight, 1 a.m., 2 a.m. sometimes, weekend work. And that will happen to people who go into the city at certain times. But if it's not for a purpose, and I'll talk about my purpose in the next few slides, if it's not for a purpose, then really there is a strong chance of A, burnout, and B, it's really meaningless. I mean, why would you be doing that and sacrificing spending time with your family, with your kids? I have a son who's 13, 14 months. Why would you do that otherwise? And that's something I want to go into as well. So inshallah today, 3, 4, maybe 5 topics. Firstly, putting Islam at the heart of your career. Second thing is practical tips about how to actually apply and get in. We won't talk too much about that because I presume you guys can maybe get in touch with me afterwards, and we also have quite a few resources online as well about that. The third thing is navigating professional life as a Muslim. So how do you deal with those canapé socials and those champagne socials, and can you have the champagne or not? And then finally, entrepreneurship. So this is not actually on there, but I want to talk about entrepreneurship because I think that's a big change in my thinking personally since last year. And I want to share with you why I think that's really, really important. So let's go on to the first section. So really high-level principle stuff. We all want to go to Jannah, right? That's where we want to end up. This is something, by the way, that I thought about really hard. I talked to people during my final years of university, and that's where it kind of started. And I've reflected on it over the years since and kind of refined it. But I think it still makes sense to me. We want to get to Jannah. How do we get to Jannah? We fulfill huququllah and huququl ibad. We fulfill the rights of Allah and we fulfill the rights of the servants of Allah, the creation. All of creation is from the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And huququllah are things like doing your prayer on time, fasting, things that are between you and between God. Then huququl ibad are things that are between you and creation and how you interact with all of the world around you. And that is the thing from which springs all of the different careers that you can possibly have. So that is, now if you follow me, this is where we're trickling down to where you're actually going to be working as a career. It starts from going to Jannah, then it's looking at fulfilling huququl ibad, and then after that you think about how can I fulfill huququl ibad? How can I actually fulfill huququl ibad? And that is by helping humanity and serving the ummah. And there's multiple ways to cut this. I have, what I do is I actually write this down and I go through in detail exactly where this leads to for me in particular. And there's various different ways you can, categorize this. This is just a taxonomy. You can use your own words for it. So then we've got the next step, which is I want to serve the Ummah, I want to help humanity. How do I actually do that, right? Everyone wants to help people, but how do you actually do that in a systematic and clear way that identifies a career for you? You do that by looking at three things. Firstly, what am I good at? What do I actually have a skill in? Because that is your competitive advantage vis-a-vis other people. So you'll focus on that. The second thing is, what do I enjoy? What do I actually like? I may be excellent at, badminton, but I don't like it. I don't like badminton. I'm not excellent at badminton, by the way, but I also don't like it. And then the third thing is, so you have what you're good at, what do you enjoy, and then the third thing, really crucial, is what is there a need for? And when you get all of those three things together, that is where you should be focusing your efforts in terms of your career. And if you don't take anything else away from this talk, just take this away and really think about that. What am I good at? Really, genuinely, what am I good at? What do people say that I'm good at? What have I historically excelled at? What do I like from this list of things? And then from these list of things, do they link up to something that there is a genuine need for in society? And then that will really shortlist for you the kind of careers that you can go into, because then you have a story, then you have a narrative. And frankly, there's lots of different careers that you could choose even then to achieve that end goal that you've identified. But then at least you have a story to tell for why you're trying to do that. And when you have that story to tell for yourself, it means that you have a purpose and you're aiming somewhere. So let's say there's three different levels. And the first level is someone who is just joining Goldman Sachs because they have a very clearly identified career track, and they're giving you free tuna sandwiches on an evening, and it pays a lot of money, it's prestigious, right? So that's the level one level of motivation. Level two might be that it also is a great career, and you will end up with lots of opportunities afterwards. So that could be like a level two motivation. And then level three is kind of where we want to aim at, which is that there's a deeper purpose behind why you're doing this. The actual journey that you're on is going to equip you with the tools that is going to get you to the end point. And you want to have an impact, and this journey will let you have that impact. And when you have that kind of trajectory that you're aiming at, this level three trajectory, if you want to call it that, it may be that you aim upwards, and rather than ending up here, you end up all the way down there, but it's still level two. And then you aim there for level three, but you end up all the way down there for level three, but it's still level three. And the key thing is, because you have this wider goal, this wider aim, and you've really thought things through, and you're grasping at something bigger than yourself, it has that motivation to drive you further, and it sets you apart from other people in the same profession. Genuinely, it will set you apart, because you're not there just to clock in and clock out. You're not there just for your career. You're there for something else. And that will mean that you get involved in, for example, for me, I get involved in lots of business development. I go out and network with lots of people because I need to, because of this wider goal that I have. And incidentally, that also has lots of benefits for me in terms of my workplace. But if you didn't have that wider goal, you wouldn't be doing that. So you should have that wider goal. So that's really it in a nutshell. If you want to take one thing away, that's the thing you should take away. And I think we can share these slides afterwards as well. So let's whiz through some of these. I don't want to talk too long. I want to talk maybe for about 15 minutes more, maybe 20 minutes, and then just open it up for questions, because I think that's where it's useful. So really what I've been talking about is make sure you have a plan. And let me share with you what my plan looks like, if I can. Mustafa, do you want to, or someone, do you mind just grabbing my phone from the end? You probably won't be able to see it, but it's still useful. So I just have a plan on OneNote, and I regularly draw this out and reassess my life. And because things happen, things change, and you have to readjust what's going to happen. So it's the same exact thing that I've started with there. You probably can't see it, but the rida of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, حقوق Allah, حقوق العباد, and then حقوق العباد, I've categorized it as helping Muslims and helping non-Muslims. And then from the Muslim side, I have specifically two goals, which is A, to empower them, and B, to educate them. And then on the non-Muslim side, I have two goals, which is A, to give da'wah, and then 2, to give value add, just generally. And so for me, the enabling side of things, so enabling Muslims to fulfill their purpose in life, which I've defined as to bring about a flourishing society by adding value to it the prophetic way. To enable them to do that, I've set up the IRU, which is the Islamophobia Response Unit. So in order to enable Muslims to live a flourishing life in this society as a Muslim, there is the Islamophobia Response Unit. And in order for them to do that, they need Islamic finance. They need to have halal personal finance. That's where Islamic Finance Guru comes in. In order for them to even realize that this is something that they should be thinking about and having a higher purpose, I educate them. And this is what I'm doing right now. In order for me to educate them properly, I need to lead them back to the Quran, which is the message of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala on how to live life. That's the blueprint. So that's where the tafsir comes in and other Quranic classes come in. And then, and by the way, you might be thinking, hang on, so where does the law stuff fit in, which is what you're going to be doing permanently? Well, it permeates all of that. So Islamic finance is very much driven by the legal framework that we live in, funds, investments. We understand funds and investments through working in the industry, which is what I do. And then the IRU is just a natural fit anyway. When you're fighting a legal battle for someone who's suffered discrimination or a hate crime, you need to be a lawyer, frankly, and that's where that fits in. And on the non-Muslim side, you've got da'wah, which is, again, I've categorized it as winning over the hearts and the minds. And that has its own specific things that I work on as well, such as I write novels, and I want to finally actually finish it off and actually publish one. And I think that's a really important contribution, that if some of you are interested in the creative side of things, like acting or whatever you're interested in, that's something that you can have real value add as well, because not many Muslims are doing that. And then finally, you have general value add. And there I've put in very vague terms politics, because I did PP at Oxford, so I have this idea that probably I should at some point join a party and do stuff, but I'm not really sure what that is at this stage. So that's a practical example of applying this stuff, because you might be thinking, hang on, this is really, really general. How do you make it really specific? And I've had to think really hard about what am I good at, how am I going to try and pull all of this together and create a narrative. And it is about creating that narrative personally for yourself. And if you have any questions, feel free to just reach out to me, Ibrahim at IslamicFinanceGuru.com. I probably will get back to you as soon as I can, which is in a few days usually. So opportunity cost, efficiency. A lot of the time, people think that this is something that is good that I can do, but they don't think that this the most effective, most useful use of my time, because you and I will die, right? That means that we have a finite resource, which is time. And if we are not using our time most efficiently, then there's a problem. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He did not say to us that, just generally do good. He said, فَاسْتَبِقُوا الْخَيْرَاتِ. He said, strive for good, compete for good. So we want to be the most effective and eke out the absolute most benefit that we can from this life, that we can, so we benefit in the akhirah. And that means to be really efficient and focused on what you actually should be doing. And then you have to work hard. You have to work very, very hard. And that means whatever you're doing is probably not hard enough. Like, until you're, you read the examples of some of these people in history, it was said that Imam Nawawi, he fell asleep for a number of years whilst reading a book, and he just fall asleep, and books were all around him, and his pillow would become one of the books around him, and he would literally fall asleep like that. Imam Bukhari, he would wake up in the middle of the night, he would be dreaming about a hadith. He would wake up in the middle of the night and he'd make some notes and he'd go back to sleep. He was that engrossed in what he was doing. So if you're not feeling the pinch in your life, if you're not feeling like this is bloody hard work, then I don't think you're working hard enough. You should be working a lot harder. And you can, even when you're working hard and you think to yourself, oh, I'm really working hard, these exams are really hard, I'm waking up, I'm going to the gym in the morning, this is hard work. You can still do a lot more. You can still do so much more. And there's a great film that I was telling Ahmed about called Yes Man. And obviously this is an exaggeration, but this Yes Man film was a film about a guy who was told by a coach to just say yes to everything that came to him. And so he did. And actually things started going really well for him because it opened all sorts of different avenues up. But then at the end, the kind of message was that you don't say yes to absolutely everything, but you should be very open to doing lots of new things and lots of things in general. So the other message, if you don't remember the first one that I said you should remember, the other message is work harder. Like, genuinely, whatever you're doing, you can work harder. If you're sleeping 7-8 hours a day, you can work harder because you can easily just sleep less. If you're chilling out and watching, you look on your YouTube, it'll tell you how many hours you watch YouTube every day. If you're watching YouTube for hours or on end, you can work harder than that because you're watching YouTube or you're wasting your time. If you're just chilling out with friends, and that's not a bad thing, by the way. You should have downtime. That is a good thing. But if that's all you do, you're basically known as a chiller, then that's a problem as well. You can work harder. And I wish that I had worked harder at university, so that's why I'm telling you this. And we'll get on to one particular way that you can work hard shortly. So this is a nice graphic. I think it's a book called Who Runs This Place by, if I'm not wrong, a guy called Anthony Sampson. Might be wrong about that. But yeah, Who Runs This Place? And it's a really nice snapshot of where the power lies in the UK. And if you want ideas for the kind of jobs that you should be going into so that you can have an influence and an impact as a Muslim, then this isn't a bad place to start with. And notice how all of these places are places where there's not very many Muslims. Right, so let's run through this fairly quickly. I'm not going to talk about each of these. If you've got any particular questions about this, then do shout out afterwards, and we'll try and deal with them. But I suppose I would like to touch on just one of these actually, which is drinking culture. Alcohol and drink permeates all areas of British society, as you and I all know. And in the city, it's equally the case, perhaps more so. And there's almost a screen on top of that of being middle class, upper class, and how you interact with alcohol as a middle class and upper class individual. And as Muslims, we are neither middle class and upper class most of the time, and we don't drink alcohol. So there's a dual problem. So how do you deal with that? Well, I think simply put, you will find that actually there's multiple ways of interacting with the people that you need to interact with, by building relationships with the people you need to build relationships with, without resorting to alcohol and without resorting to necessarily even socializing in contexts where there's lots of alcohol. And to the extent that you are dragged along to some of these like canapé things, then you should obviously not drink, but you should also encourage the organizers to have a wider set of ideas for events and encourage them to do that. And then I think the final thing to say on alcohol is that it's not actually that rampant. From the outside, it might look like there's this really big boozy culture in the city, but actually things are changing a lot. And your generation, I mean, obviously you guys don't drink, but your generation who can drink from a religious perspective, even they don't drink. Lots of people are teetotal in the younger generations coming through, and that has had an impact on the city as well. So this is much less of a concern than it used to be. But when it comes to a novel situation, just go back down to the basic principle, which is I'm a Muslim. I have firm reasons for not drinking. This is a good thing, and I'm just going to be proud about how I live my life and how I conduct myself. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that you foist your opinions on other people, or you make things very difficult for your colleagues or anything like that. You can, if you are clever and sensible and socially aware, you can actually forge that middle path, which Islam tells us to. And if you've got any specific questions, then do ask. Yeah, so this is an important slide. This is the slide I want to spend a little bit of time on. So generally in the city, you've got investment banking, you've got accountancy, you've got management consultancy, you've got law firms, and that's probably about it. You've got maybe insurance as well. The first thing to say is that if you're going into an advisory role, that is a role where you are selling a specific service that in of itself is not haram. So for example, accountancy, for example, law, for example, consultancy. These things are, at least at the outset, they would be deemed permissible. Now, if you're working as a finance lawyer, I would personally be very uncomfortable with that. And there's specific hadith about not witnessing contracts that are interest-based contracts. And as a lawyer, where you are drafting this thing and you're helping them execute this stuff, that would be a problem. But post-fact auditing of accounts or anything like that, or even advising on the structuring of transactions is fine, because strictly speaking, you're providing an advisory service. Then we get to investment banking, and my view on investment banking is that generally speaking, it's not permissible. And that is because investment banking is focused on debt finance, it's focused on trading, and trading specifically in things like derivatives, forwards, futures, options, CFDs, debt-based instruments like bonds, and the mainstream consensus of all of these instruments is that this is haram. Now, there are debates, and we can go into that about forwards, futures, options, and various different derivatives, if there could be arguments made there. But this would be an academic discussion, and frankly, if you're going to work in a trading floor, you're going to start with bonds, and you're going to start with various different kinds of exotic derivatives and FX derivatives, and dealing with all sorts of equities, haram and halal. It's just not realistic that you're going to be able to focus on a specific subset which is halal, and you probably don't even know what that subset is. If you do want to find out, we have a Sharia screening course that teaches you, or you could just look at, just Google it online and find it. So that's the first thing to say. Investment banking is, generally speaking, haram. Now, if push comes to shove, you might say, oh, well, I'm working in risk and compliance, I'm working in assurance, or whatever fancy words they use. My view is that if you're working in an investment bank, then it is not still permissible, because you are supporting something that is fundamentally impermissible, and you should not be working there even as an employee. I know there are scholars that would have contrary views on that, and if you want to follow them, be my guest. But my personal view, having studied the subject, having interacted with people in investment banking, and I have friends in investment banking. I met an investment banker this morning. We are constantly on calls with investment bankers. I understand this industry, and my sincere view is that it is not something that a Muslim should be doing directly. However, you could work for an advisory boutique instead, such as Lazard's or Moelis & Company or Mazars or Perella Weinberg or any of these kind of advisory boutiques that focus on M&A, because then you are doing an advisory service and you're focusing on a fundamentally permissible transaction, which is M&A, mergers and acquisitions. Yeah.
And what about hedge funds?
So hedge funds, if you go back to the trading discussion, the same would apply really there. Hedge funds, they hedge. What does hedge actually mean? It means that you're trying to use arbitrage, you're trying to use long and short trading techniques to try and make a gain in the market, whatever happens. And then you also use lots of derivatives, and there's lots of different techniques that hedge funds use. All of this stuff is hugely problematic from an Islamic perspective. Short selling from an Islamic perspective is not permissible. So that would, from the offset, would pose a problem. Then you've got long only. So that's the sell side, if you want to call it that. That's the sell side, where they sell you services and they sell you products. Then you've got the buy side, which is the investment houses that have the money. Generally speaking, the buy side is much more permissible. But if you're working in a debt fund, or if you're working in a fund or in an investment house that specifically focuses on interest, then of course that wouldn't be permissible. But if you are going for like a long only fund, then I would not have any problems with that. And I think there you can actually focus in on and try and get a specialism in halal equities. That will be ideal. But even if you can't, then at least you're in the right place, and you can have those conversations to steer yourself to where you need to be. And fundamentally what they're doing in these businesses is permissible. They're buying and selling equities, they're investing in assets. So I wouldn't have a problem with that. Then in terms of private equity, venture capital, it's a tricky one. I would say that some venture funds are permissible to work in. And some PE funds may be permissible to work in, but generally speaking, these guys would not be permissible, in my view, solely because of the techniques that they used to make this return that they make, and the techniques they use are underpinned by leverage. They use leverage buyouts. They take on debt even before they actually buy the company. Then once they buy the company, they fill it with debt to try and magnify their returns. That is problematic, and the whole industry is very much focused on these kind of interest-based returns. So I would say that's impermissible. If you can find a Sharia compliant fund, then be my guest. Anything else that I have missed? Yeah, and if you're working in a leveraged company, like any company in the UK will have some level of debt, especially if they're a large, FTSE 100 type company. But in my view, that is fine, as long as they're fundamentally not doing something that is impermissible. So if you're working in HSBC, my answer to that would be obvious. But if you're working in Shell, then even if they do have some kind of random debt kicking around, or they deal in oil futures or something like that, because it's fundamentally something that is permissible, buying and selling oil, well, mainly drilling and then selling oil, I wouldn't have a problem with that, even if it is leveraged. I mean, pretty much every company is leveraged out there. So final slide, and I think this is really important for you guys. We are at a cusp in our progress as humanity, in that we are more than ever before connected with information. We are connected with other people around the world, and we are connected with data. Why is that so important? Well, it's important because let's say you take a baby and you drop him into the middle of the Amazon jungle, and let's say he isn't, eaten, or he starves to death. He somehow survives, and he grows up in the jungle. Do you think that this baby, who grows up to be an adult, would be much more sophisticated than a chimpanzee or a gorilla? They probably would be a little bit more sophisticated, but do you think they would be anywhere near as sophisticated as you and I? Teach them how to talk? Who would teach them how to interact, how to clean themselves, how to eat or drink? What about all of these high-level cultural things that we engage in? Who would teach them all of that stuff? Religion, where does that come in? They wouldn't have any of that stuff. And so that then shows us the value of all of that information that we learn from society around us. We learn that stuff from the data that we have available to us and that we internalize over the years. And today, coming back to the point I made initially, we have more information, more data, more technology than ever before. And in entrepreneurship and in business and where human beings progress as a civilization, as a race, is where you join up dots, you join up bits of data, and you come up with something new. You come up with something useful, and you come up with something clever. And today, more than ever before, that is possible. So if I was in your position, and this is something I regret, that at university I should have spent more time focusing on entrepreneurship. You guys have an opportunity, completely risk-free, frankly, to get involved and start stuff, have ideas, and try and execute on those ideas, and fail. Get those mistakes out early doors, because you will learn from those mistakes. And even after university, you're not married, you don't have any obligations or any responsibilities. You could potentially take a year out and really make a go at doing something amazing. I have friends who now run companies that have raised 50 million in the last seed round, and they're Muslims. And that's what they did. They took a year out, they refused the city jobs that they had, and they made a go at this, and it worked. And it got them where they are today. And there are other friends who tried it and it didn't work, and they're perfectly fine as well. They're doing decent jobs somewhere as well. And you have a privilege as someone who's educated at LSE that you're not going to be on the streets, even if you fail. So you need to take advantage of that by getting stuck into entrepreneurship as much as you can. And then, if you actually want help on this, like people come to us all the time for this stuff. You need a few key ingredients. You need funding, you need ideas, you need consultancy. How do I actually do this stuff? How do I negotiate with these people? How do I do legal stuff? We can help with all of that. But the most important thing is that you need to be determined and you need to really stick at it. And you don't just focus on talking, actually focus on doing. And doing it badly is better than not doing it at all. Do it badly, because then you will learn what doesn't work, and then you can reiterate. And you might be thinking, okay, so how do I actually deliver something from scratch? Well, let's take an idea. So I was listening to an idea today that you can just go and give flyers out on the street and get a business to pay you $25 to give out flyers into various houses for about an hour. And this person was sharing how he got 4 businesses to do that for him, and then he'd give 4 flyers out into these houses, and he'd make $100 per hour. And he's now somehow scaled this business to £100,000. So let's say you've got this idea and you want to actually implement it in the UK here and now. So you've got this idea. What's the first thing that you need to do? I mean, obviously it kind of says it on the screen. The first thing that you need to do, any ideas? Validate. How would you do that? What's that?
And get it from the right people and with the right expertise to see if the business model will work.
No, I don't think so. So the brother said you would ask the people with the expertise and the right knowledge to see if the business would work. I don't think that's right. How would you validate this idea? Go to customers. What do you mean by that? Yep. Arguably, yeah. You need to. I don't know about the free bit. I know I have put it on there potentially. It kind of works for some models. For this model, I actually think you should see if people will pay you for it. If people are interested, they will pay you for something. And if they are paying you for something, that means that there's some kind of traction there, that you have some kind of model that you can work with. Now, the next thing after that is you start scaling. You've got money coming in and you have an idea of how that money comes in. You just start building that out a little bit and see where you get to. There will come a certain point where you will stop growing and you kind of need to take a step back and think, okay, so this is where I've got to. I've got this kind of business where me and my friend are spending 2 hours on a weekend doing this and people are paying us. Now we need to hire people, or we need to raise money to do this in a more effective manner, because we need to reach out to more businesses and we need to get more employees on board to actually do this thing. And so then you need to strategize about how you do that. What are the cash flows looking like? Is this something that can really go big? And if so, how? And what money do you need to do that? And if so, how are you going to get that funding? So these are things that come further down the line. But the most important thing in all of this is to have an idea and then just make a go of it, right? Have an idea and make a go of it. And if it doesn't work, then try again. Genuinely, I would encourage all of you to get involved in some kind of entrepreneurship, even if it is at a small level, because you will gain a lot from it. And I think the Muslim community will gain a lot from it as well. And if you start something quite small, try and be consistent with it, because you never know where it can lead. Like Islamic Finance Guru, I started this, I think, 3.5 years ago, just as a blog, a random blog, 2 guys, fresh out of university, who started a blog. And over the years, I've obviously studied, and that's added value to the content and all that sort of stuff. But it was just a blog. And you just kept them plugging away for 3.5, 4 years. And think about it yourself. Things that you have historically done really well at and achieved great things in are probably things that you plugged away for years in the background for. So if you're really good at a particular sport, you know how much effort went into that. If you're really good at a particular subject or a particular area or a particular skill, you know how many hours have been spent doing that thing. And so don't think that things are going to happen for you overnight. Do something that you're passionate about as well with this entrepreneurship idea, because you can then actually have the longevity to continue with it. And then just keep plugging away. And inshallah, you'll get somewhere. The other thing to say about that very last point about keep plugging away is do something that is genuinely valuable as well. Try and be as effective as you can, because even if it doesn't make any money, at least you've done something that is valuable, and the journey itself is worth it. So I'll stop there, and inshallah, if you have any questions, then feel free.